From the highest point in Twente, the Netherlands, I am Sebastian Ortiz, and this is Tankenberg News, Twente at your feet. I would like to begin today with a quote from Marcus Tullius Cicero, speaking to the Roman Senate. A nation can survive its fools, and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. And what a unique occasion today to talk not only about cowards, but also fools. Now, we all understand the objective authority of truth, true ideas, true arguments, mathematics, what Professor Alfred Cromwell, in a previous interview that we had on this channel, called the Neoplatonic aspect. It was a very interesting conversation. I really recommend that you should go and watch it because I asked him the question, if you are good at mathematics, why would you study pure mathematics and not engineering or finance or computer science? And he said, because if you study mathematics, you can do all of those things. And of course, I didn't mean to interrupt him at the time, but I should say that this is the same with philosophy. The concept of the synthetic a priori, that is the Kantian term, the term coined by German philosopher Immanuel Kant, is the idea of there where concepts overlap with physical things and their interactions, there you have truth. And of course, we all accept the authority of the truth. However, in the modern world, truth has been reduced only to that which is mechanically determined, cause and effect, or definitively tautological. That is, a description of a physical body, like a chair has legs and it's meant to be sat on. But what about ethical truths? What about moral truths? What about what is right and what is wrong? And here, the historical literary tradition of the Western world, which includes the biblical canon of Holy Scriptures, is of great importance to understand the cultural development of ideas about justice and about goodness. Ideas about what is truly just. For example, the libertarian position is that as far as the enforceable goes, only self defense and defense of other people who cannot defend themselves is truly just. Otherwise, you commit a transgression by enforcing excessively. That is, by breaking the proportionality between the transgression and punishment. And this is not a technicality of criminal law. This is the idea that you should be tolerant of everything that is not imminently, physically, irreversibly destructive of your body. And of course, there are many ways in which you can analyze this, but this was the Christian position for 20 centuries. The idea was that toleration is a virtue, in the same sense, by analogy, that if you have a car or a guitar or a bicycle that is very durable, this is good because its internal composition, its materials, and its structure can withstand the pressures of the environment, of wear and tear. And that in a very stoic fashion, the Christian should be forgiving. should be patient. There's a very beautiful quote in the Gospels, in the not in the Gospels, in the letters of Paul, where he describes love as ever patient and not driven by pride. But the challenge comes in defining what is goodness. And this has already been done, as I said, by Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian faith throughout the ages. But in the modern world that demands that the concepts that are in use to describe justice be as objective and as universal as the concepts in mathematics or in physics or in engineering, there is a problem. And the problem is of confusion. Obviously, we are acting agents. We have free will. We choose among different alternatives. And good and evil can potentially extend to the whole of human action and interaction. And so you have to find a minimum common denominator where you draw the line. And that is the reason why in the previous video I was saying that power is the enforceable. The enforceable is that which can be imposed against your will by men with guns, policemen, because of an order by a judge based on a piece of legislation that was voted upon by politicians. This is not reducing the what is good and what is evil of force to a universal, objective, true ethics of action, of you should do this, you shouldn't do that. It is instead avoiding the question by inviting elements of what is arbitrary. Now, there are two kinds of realists, three kinds of realists. There are the amoralist, nihilist, so-called realists, who believe that what is real, what is true, is only the physical properties and mechanisms seen in nature. And yet we know from our hindsight that nuclear energy and the elements were real and they existed in nature before they were discovered. The same with electricity. And yet those things were, for many centuries, invisible to us. Then there are the realists who are ambiguous. These are the people whose idea of what the Dutch here call gezond verstand, a healthy understanding or common sense, is that moderation and prudence involve not pressing, as an activist, on with ideas or arguments or rhetoric that may be inherently against the goals and interests of those living near you, either in time or in space, in your generation. There are a lot of cowards to this effect. The Straussians are, by and large, from my perspective, cowards. Now, we understand that you can read a book allegorically, you can read a book literally, historically, grammatically, but it is also worth understanding the intention of the book. What is the originator's, the author's, intention in writing the book? And that is why I mentioned in a previous video how the limits of the province called Christendom are the creed and the golden rule. Those are the borders of Christendom. And then you have realists, the third category of realists, who believe that mathematics or language are ways of discovering the truth of reality that may be more or less precise, but that they are not mere pictures, illustrations of reality. That to the extent that an idea is true, it is because it is isomorphic, would say someone like Christopher Langan with his cognitive theoretical model of the universe. That is, that the truth of things is not only in its the physical property of things, its material composition, or its mechanisms, but that there are different kinds of truths. And this brings me to the Neoplatonic question. My good friend Frank van Doon was speaking to me on the phone the other day, and he was explaining to me how, in the modern age, utilitarianism, what's in it for me, what is the benefit in this, has done away even with the principle of pacta sunt servanda, of juridic security. Juridic security is the concept that because there is a common agreement and understanding of what the law is, even if ignorance of the law is no excuse for its transgression, that this is what will be upheld. And I should mention that I learned some things this week, this past week, here in the Netherlands. I was watching an interview of old journalist Willem Oltmans. And I heard a term that I was not familiar with. And so, just as a curiosity, if I may digress for a moment, do you know what a vieze rotzak is? A vieze rotzak is someone who will uphold and enforce the lower law in order not to uphold and enforce the higher law. Turns out that vieze rotzak means dirty trash bag in Dutch. But anyway, as I was saying, people like Mr. Alfred Cromwell or Professor Frank van Doon or myself, we believe that there is a non-changing, perpetual, permanent, ever existing right and wrong. And that right and wrong, what determines good and evil, is universal. And in the 20th century, there were people such as Leo Strauss, who would argue that when you read a text, you are confronted with an esoteric double entendre. That if you read a text, you're not reading what the author means for people to read, that you're reading your own interpretation, and that the intention of the author is indiscernible. And the reason is that the author was a coward, that the cowardly author could not speak freely for fear that he would be persecuted or uh, killed, whacked, would say John McAfee. And this is the reason why, even though I would posit that that there is a minimalism about what should be enforced in libertarianism that is very congruent with the toleration that developed for 20 centuries in Christendom before the Peace of Westphalia and borders and all of that, before the before the Christian civilization collapsed into the nation state with its elements of a monopoly on courts and police, population, government, and territorial demarcation. Before that, when what used to apply was where two come in my name, I will be in between them, was the idea that there is a truth. And this truth can be logically understood, reasonably. Ratio, reason in Latin, logos, word in Greek. And so that you should call a spade, and not sleaze your way into ambiguity. There is right and there is wrong. There is good and evil. You must choose. And this leads me to a very minor character in history that is very popular here on YouTube, where I can see the views of the channel go up and then go down. Very, very amusing. And that is Jordan Peterson, who is still uh, walking the streets. And I would, as a realist of the third category, follower of the late professor of psychiatry, Thomas Sass, Thomas Schasch, who wrote The Myth of Mental Illness, I would like to contrast Mr. Peterson with who dresses like a joker with someone like James Fallon. I will put links below so you know who I'm talking about. Thank you for watching.